Welcome to Legacy Cast, where we talk about your story, your way, and what are you doing to make sure that people know about you many generations from now. Welcome, listeners, to Legacy Cast. This is your program where we bring guests from all around the world to speak to you and come to you speaking about really what they're doing in their lives that's going to leave a lasting mark on those around them, obviously, but also the community and the world at large. That really is what I feel like a legacy is here, and it's your story told your way, and that's what we bring people in for. And today I have a guest, Maxwell Ivey. I believe he just goes by Max, but Max is he goes by the nickname, I guess, the blind blogger from what I'm seeing here, and we'll get into some of those details here in a moment. But welcome to the program, Max.
Well, thanks, James. Appreciate you having me on the show. And yes, everybody does call me Max. And I am also known out there as the blind blogger, or in the amusement industry, I'm also known as Mr. Midway. So.
Oh, excellent. So I'm guessing, just from what I'm seeing here is that, you have a vision handicap. Is that understanding correctly?
Yeah, I have retinitis pigmentosa, and people generally refer to it as RP. I started losing my vision when I was about 4. I lost it down to what they would call legally blind by the time I was in junior high school, and by the time I was in college, I had what they would call light perception, but in my opinion is total blindness.
Goodness. Yeah, I certainly would. I can't even sympathize. To be quite honest, it's something that people that do not suffer from that can't even relate. So I commend you for making the best of that situation, and just moving on and being able to not only move on but to use that in some way for positive good. So I certainly salute that.
Right. I feel like just about everybody has a disability. Everybody has a blindness to something in their lives. We talk about visible disabilities and invisible disabilities, and of course, lately it seems like we have more of the invisible kind. But it took me a long time to understand that things that I do that seem ordinary to me become examples to other people, because there are so many people who don't have an obvious disability, and yet they don't, as you say, they don't do things with their lives, and they don't really challenge themselves or try to do things for other people, and they don't have any type of disability. So because of that, me doing this as a blind person does have value, and surprisingly, I am able to inspire others.
Yeah, and that's a part of what we try to do here on the show is bring out the things that other people are doing as an inspiration, because ultimately like I was mentioning in the kind of the intro of the program, is that when we build a legacy, it's something that we're wanting our story to be told for many generations. It's something I personally believe it even comes back from a spiritual standpoint, that to build a legacy, it's something that you're wanting the generations, not just your children or your grandchildren, but many after that, many generations to come, to be able to know that you lived, know what you did that made a difference, and then also to be able to know of those people that you came in contact with, because they were made better by that example. And so that's why I'm glad to have you here to be able to open up some of your experience.
Yeah. I think about what we're doing now. We're having an interview. We call it a podcast, but you think about it, there's not much really different between what me and you are doing when we help somebody share their story of overcoming their life circumstances or solving a problem. There's not much difference between that and thousands of years ago, when the elders would sit around the fire with the young people and tell them the stories from their past to educate them on things that they would have to deal with in their lifetime.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's, the only difference really is just the medium that we're doing it. Now we have digital age that we're able to use and record that, as opposed to just passing it verbally, or for those cultures that did have a written language, then, ultimately writing it down either on tablets or in books as that technology came along. I am part Native American, and so that becomes even more a part of my personality in the storytelling, because that's something that's very near and dear to my family, is the verbal traditions, because many of the native peoples here in the U.S. did not have a written language. Mine, part of that being Cherokee, they did have a written language, which was unique, but most of the different nations did not have one. And so, a spoken tradition was very big. And so that's, I guess, sort of a natural calling for me doing a podcast.
Right. And now even the Library of Congress is starting to do its part to maintain the heritage of the spoken word. And
sure.
I also think it's great that, a lot of people who do shows are doing them on platforms where these shows are going to be archived. And even if James Snow isn't around 100 years from now, James Snow's podcasts and his interviews, they may be somewhere online in the cloud, or possibly printed out or saved on hard drives. I mean, just think about that. You and me, we're building a legacy, one person's story at a time, and that's a great thing to accomplish.
And I appreciate you kind of seeing it in those terms, because that, though I really don't think about that from a day-to-day basis. I guess deep down, I do hope that this does last on a lot longer than the age of whatever a microfiche or whatever the technology is that they put stuff on.
Yeah. I wonder how many people even know what microfiche is. We probably just use the word. They're hoping we weren't cussing at them.
Yeah, I probably just aged myself a little bit, and we have some millennials that are going to be very confused by listening to this program.
Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about legacies, though, as far as from a business standpoint, is that something that you think that is important? People really take time to spend energy putting into their business? What is that business legacy going to be?
I don't think most people take the time to think about their business legacy. I think most people, and at least this has been this in my case, is it's a matter of showing up every day, seeing what the problem or the opportunity is for that given day, and then what can you do about it between now and the time you go to bed. What will you be able to do about it over the next weeks or months? I think it's interesting. I don't think most business owners worry about their legacy, but it seems like most politicians and quite a few of the professional athletes do worry about their legacy. And maybe that's because especially with athletes, because they have such a shorter lifespan in their professional endeavor. Maybe that's why they think of it more. But I don't think I've ever had a discussion with anybody before you about what would my legacy be or what would their legacy be.
Yeah, and I know that in ages past that was something that's very large. Because even in the naming of people, the surnames. You had surnames such as Thatcher, to where people that made nets, for the fishermen, or hunter, different trades. Those trades would be represented in a person's last name, and so that actually was part of their legacy, because it was a family thing that was passed generation upon generation upon generation. And right. I think maybe some of our society, unfortunately, has gotten away from that. And hopefully, through this program, we'll kind of open people's eyes a little bit to where they start thinking, maybe I should look at, what I'm doing in business as a legacy, because we don't create a company just to have it for now and then it fizzle away and no longer, it cease to be once we're through with it. We want to create a company so that it lasts and we pass it to somebody else to take over. And then they're able to build upon that, and then they pass it to someone else. Ideally, is
right. Right. Now, what you're talking about there does make me think of one particular thing. Before I started being known as the Blind Blogger, I was a carnival owner, and when my dad died, the carnival went out of business. So I started helping people sell amusement equipment. And while that's not my primary thing, I still do it. And the reason I do it is because I realized that if the Midway marketplace isn't there, then the other options that people have to find places to buy and sell, mainly sell their surplus items, they're not as ethical as I am. And that's not bragging. That's not me trying to sell myself. It's an honest fact that the other people in the business of brokering amusement equipment, they are generally tied to one major advertiser or to a bank, to a lender. And so their loyalties are split, and they don't always think of the client first. So while I don't make a lot of money helping people sell rides and games and generators and stuff, I still do it because I know they need me. And I feel like while I wouldn't have called it a legacy, I feel like continuing to provide that service where nobody else is providing it in the same way is important to me.
It is. And that really is quite literally, a part of your legacy is that you're doing something that not everyone does. And so, there will be people that later on will remember that and remember for what you have done. So if you're kind of looking at your business and its future, the things that you're doing professionally from the business owner standpoint, though, what would you say maybe a few things are that concern you about business or maybe even keep you up at night that you worry about? Are there a few things?
I'm not exactly sure there are things that worry me. There are actually more things that encourage me. I mean, but that could just be because I'm generally a positive, more optimistic person. But like the one thing that I'm really encouraged by is how nowadays it's not only okay, but it's critical to your success to share your story, to let people know who you are and let them get to know you as a person and not just the face of a particular business. So the whole idea of storytelling and that being part of branding nowadays, I really love that. As a blind person, there are so many more opportunities in business than there would have been even 10 years ago with all the technology and with the many different ways you can connect with people online, and the way some of those things allow you to prevent having to meet people in person and having to solve the logistical issues that go along with being somebody who doesn't drive or doesn't have somebody to drive. So that's a positive. I mean, it's great. It's great knowing that blind people are no longer limited to vending, fixing pianos, working on street corners. It's great to know that some of them are out having big adventures, that many of them are successful authors. And so I see a lot more opportunities for people in general, but for people with disabilities especially. And it doesn't hurt that some of us people who have disabilities believe that the adversity we've come through makes us more resilient and gives us an advantage when it comes to competing and starting and maintaining a business. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing I think though that would concern me, especially about the online culture, is and there are two things having to do with social media. One is the continued fracturing and splitting of people into one of two camps, either for or against a particular issue or part of a group. And that means if you're not with us, you're against us. The other thing is how many people they feel like they want people to see them as successful based on a particular definition of what that means. And so when they post online, they only post positive, upbeat, good news about themselves. And I think that leads to a bit of depression for people. And that can be especially difficult for a sole proprietor, an entrepreneur who is working in isolation a lot and seeing all these other great, happy moments in social media. And they're like, I'm not doing that well, So I think those are two things that are really negatives. I would love to see us get out of this cycle of us against them. And I wish more people would have the courage to say, hey, I didn't do it so great today, but here's what I plan to do tomorrow. I mean, just today I had to write a post because, this is the way I do it. I try to set a good example for people to be honest and open online. I had to write a post saying, that competition that I asked y'all to help me win, well, the voting doesn't start for 2 weeks. And so basically, y'all have been pressing the like button. Y'all haven't been voting for me. And I don't know that everybody would have admitted a mistake like that on something that, they should have known better. It should have been pretty obvious that that was the way it was going to work. But, I told people, I said, I hope that y'all will all be here to support me again in 2 weeks when it starts over. And so far everybody has said, hey, Max, just remind us, just let us know when it's time to go again, and we'll be there for you. And that's just one example. I tell people all the time, life ain't the Olympics, so stop trying to win those style points. I'm doing my best to show people that we don't have to be afraid to be honest online, and that for the most part, if you are, people are going to be supportive of you, unless you were one of those, arrogant, I'm better than the rest of y'all type people to start with. Then they'll jump all over you.
Yeah, and honesty and transparency is so important these days, because that really shows people your character and your integrity. Is when you're honest and transparent, then integrity shines through. And so that at the end of the day is something that we should cherish in all of our actions, I think.
Yeah. I've been told that I am brutally honest, and that I approach the world with a wide-eyed wonder. So,
that's a good way to be.
Yeah.
It's a good way to be. I mean, people don't wonder where they stand, when you're very honest with them. So, it's always better to be honest and then, ask for forgiveness than to not be honest and then ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah, I just wish we could teach our elected officials, our bureaucratic agents, quite a large number of the staff at businesses we do business with every day. I just wish it would become a more common thing, because nobody is perfect, but how many times have you seen a company just totally ruin their image because of not being willing to say, okay, we messed up, we're sorry, here's what we're going to do to fix it?
Yeah, it may hurt. It may hurt in the very beginning, but in the long run, you're going to recoup because of being honest.
Yeah.
And if you're not honest, then you may not take those upfront losses, but in the end, you're going to lose a lot more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So, what do you think? Maybe some of the things that, especially for new entrepreneurs, maybe that they should be looking for, avoiding, that will keep them from giving up or failing in business?
I would say trying to avoid the overwhelm, because when you're starting a new business, you're going to be imagining or seeing so many things that you feel like you ought to be doing or need to be doing, and you're not going to be able to do them all, and you certainly won't be able to do them all right away. And so you have to focus on some of the things that you can actually take action on. And I've come up with a 4-question method that I like to share with business owners that I think makes it a little easier. One is, if you have that big long list of stuff that you think you need to be doing, then you want to break it down. You want to approach each item as a question and ask yourself, can I do this? If you can do it, then you take action on it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you can't do it, then you say, okay, if I can't do it, can I get somebody to teach me how to do it? And if it's something that you believe you can learn, then you make arrangements to start your training. You reach out to a mentor, you sign up for a college class or a workshop or something, and you start the learning process. Okay. If you can't do it and you can't learn it, then can you get somebody else to do it for you? And that could mean hiring somebody, or it could mean just being willing to ask people for help and let people know what your needs are. Because of this transparency we were just talking about, there have been many times where people have done work for me either for free or for less than they would usually charge, because they knew I had a sincere wish to accomplish a goal, and they wanted to be part of that. They wanted to help me with that. And in some cases, they also wanted a testimonial. They wanted to be able to say that they helped me do something, and I'm totally fine with that. So if you can get somebody else to do it, then great. Hire it out, farm it out. Talk to a family member. If you can't do it, you can't learn it, and you can't get somebody else to do it, then you put it off to the side and do your best to ignore it and focus on the things that you can actually do something about. Every so often, go back and look at your list again, because some of those things that you can't do now are going to eventually move to different categories as you grow and become more capable and more talented. I like to look back at when I first started my first website 11 years ago. I didn't even know where to go to file my domain name. I knew absolutely nothing. And I started by, getting a domain name and then building a website. And then after that, it was starting a blog, and it was social media, it was email list. It wasn't like I was doing all those things at the same time every day. I was doing what I felt like was the most important next step, and I was asking questions, asking for help, trying things and seeing if they worked or if they didn't work, and if they didn't work, trying to figure out why. If they did work, trying to figure out, well, what can I do to make them work even better next time? So, that's what I did along the way. And, I never planned on writing a book. Now I've written 3. I would have 5 years ago, I would have never thought about going to New York City by myself and spending 2 weeks in the Big Apple. So as you go along in your process, you're going to get more confidence in yourself. You're going to learn new things. You're going to find skills that you didn't know you ever had. And eventually some of those things in the 4th category will move over. So if you can do it, do it. If you can't, learn it. If you can't do it or learn it, get help. If you can't do it, learn it, or get help, ignore it until you can.
Sounds like a pretty good system. And that leads me to part of my next thinking here is people creating strategies and plans within their business. Do you feel like that's something that people really should do, not only just having the strategies, but even the good old-fashioned business plan and financial plan for their business, something that they should do sooner rather than later?
I think there is a value in a business plan and a marketing plan, but I also think there's a value in looking at that plan on a regular basis and figuring out what's working and what isn't working. Figure out what assumptions you made that are correct and which ones turned out to be totally wrong. And because some people, they make a plan and they are married to that plan. That plan might as well be tattooed on their arm or painted on the side of their house, and they cannot deviate from it. But I would say a good plan is a good starting point, just like a good schedule for your workday is a good starting point. We all know that throughout the day, if we just look at one day, throughout that day, things are going to change based on things that will come up that you didn't plan on doing, things that took longer than you expected to, projects that maybe you weren't planning on starting that particular day, but here they are. But I think that a good plan is a good place to start. Just don't be too wedded to it that you can't make changes and that you can't realize that changes are necessary.
Yeah, something I've found in my experience in business, coming from the financial planning side of the business planning world, is that you really want to have a good plan, yes, but you also want it to be flexible, because things will pop up. It's like the thing that jumps out at you as you're driving down the road. Things will happen. Things will spring up, and you have to be able to flex and move with what comes your way, because otherwise you're too rigid, and then you're not able to avoid those hazards as they come up. So you always
I imagine
a door number 2.
Yeah, I imagine that's especially true with financial planning, because so many people are so close to their income versus expenses that it doesn't take much of an emergency for somebody's financial plan to have to change.
Yeah. Even just getting sick. Something a lot of people don't think about is what happens if you get sick and you can't work. You still have to make a paycheck. So what are you going to do? Even things just as simple as that is you have to think about it. So what are some of the things, resource-wise, Max, that you've run across that maybe you would recommend somebody starting out look for? Resources and support groups and what have you that have been helpful for you.
Okay, well, one thing I would say is that if you're going to be doing online business, one of the things they're going to tell you that you need to have is an email client where you can send out a mass email to people as you accumulate email addresses. And I know a lot of people prefer to use like Constant Contact or Aweber or some of the more complex ones with lots of extra features. But for me, I like to keep it simple. I don't like anything I use to be so complicated that I dread doing it to the point that I don't do it. So I use Mad Mimi. They're very reasonably priced, and they have amazing customer service. If there's anything I can't do, they will either talk me through it, or I can just send them an email and say, look, here's the email I wrote. Here's who I want to send it to. Here's when I want to send it. And here's an image I'd like to add to it when I send it. Would y'all do that? And they almost always are like, sure, Mr. Ivey. Well, they may sometimes say, give us an hour and we'll get it done for you. But especially if you're one of these people who has trouble with technology and with online platforms and things like that, I would say that Mad Mimi is well worth their investment. And they don't even offer an affiliate link, so I'm not getting paid for mentioning them. Okay. And another thing is, we are using a platform called Zoom, which I love. It's very user-friendly for everybody, especially for us blind people. They have loads of keyboard commands. And if you're going to be connecting with people, you need to have conversations or meetings online. I definitely would recommend Zoom because it's reasonably priced again. It's very easy to use. And it is so much more reliable than Skype. It's so much more professional than Facebook Live or YouTube Live. If you want to make a good impression while having an online meeting in the early days, then I would definitely recommend Zoom. There are a few communities online that have been really helpful to me over the years. There's a group called AHA Now, which is AHA-NOW.com, and a very helpful community to bloggers and podcasters and online business people, very supportive. Just in many cases, people I have met along the way by being willing to let people know what I'm up to and what I'm trying to accomplish. So I would say one of the resources that you shouldn't overlook is just the people that you come in contact with online on a regular basis. I mean, every time somebody connects with you on Facebook or sends you an email through your contact form or replies to something you've written online, every time that happens, it's an opportunity to find out a little more about them. Say hello, try to become friends and build a relationship, because you never know where those introductions will work. One of the things I tell people all the time, it's a great side benefit to doing interviews like this, is most people that I do a show with, a year, 2, 3 years later, we still exchange emails. They become part of my community. They become friends. And they become people who I like to help whenever possible. Many of them tag me on social media, and I share their content. And it's just a real great way to get to know somebody. I mean, because we're going to have, hour conversation, and we're going to probably know each other better than most people will who see each other face to face. But this is a great opportunity because you're going to find out things about me and vice versa. Like, I had no idea that your family was Native American. That's as an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are definitely valuable things and relationships as well. Like you were mentioning, spending time, being on this podcast for an hour here. Even the listeners here, they're learning about the two of us quite a bit, and that adds to their network, and so it adds value to the people that they know, because when that question comes up of, do you know somebody that does, and then fill in the blank, they're able to call back on that recollection, and then they do know somebody, and they're able to add value to that relationship.
I really like the way you put that.
So what is something that you've learned throughout life that maybe you wish you had done way back when that you did not do that you probably have I wouldn't say necessarily regret, but that you've learned is important that you had not done?
One of my favorite quotes that I picked up recently is from I can't think of the woman's name now. She's a famous Hollywood actress, and she was once asked if she would change anything in her life. She said, "Yeah, I would make the same mistakes again, just sooner." And I think that one of the mistakes that I did make in my life was fighting this idea of no longer being a carnival owner, of fighting the idea that there wasn't other things I could be doing. Probably delayed me getting to this point several years. I mean, I would be much farther along on my process as an author, a blogger, and a coach if I hadn't tried so hard to stay on the Carnival Midway, or if I hadn't fought so much. It took almost 2 years from the first time somebody called me an inspiration until I finally accepted that role and started blogging and posting as the Blind Blogger. So, there's a couple of examples where trying to hold that door open is what kept me from getting here or being even sooner or being farther along in the journey. I recently told somebody, I said, there's an old saying about how God won't close one door without opening another one. I said, but there ought to be an addition to that. It ought to say that if you won't let that first door close, that God will just burn the house down. And that's pretty much how I got out of the carnival business. I was forced out of it. That's it's how I finally started improving my health when the doctor said if I didn't get healthier that I would be dead shortly. We, for some reason, as human beings, we almost have to have crisis in order to make those big changes. And in my case, it was holding on to things longer than I should have would be the thing I would change if I could.
Yeah, I can relate in a lot of ways to that. Public speaking and doing podcasts, things of that sort, seminars and so forth. Yeah, I put that off for so long because I did not like getting up in front of groups. That was probably one of my biggest fears was getting in front of groups. And so I've actually learned that this is my therapy. And so I have some extensive therapy that I go through weekly now that put myself in the most uncomfortable situation. But I've also learned that comfort zone does not give you success. You never find success in your comfort zone. You have to get outside of that place in order to find it. And so, it's been through hard agony and pain that I've had to learn, to get outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, I've actually had one speaker who saw me give my first talk, and she's like, "Max, there must be something wrong with you because you look like this is just another day. This is just another place." And you could not care less if you were standing in front of 100 people or 1,000 or nobody. And I'm like, I actually took offense to that. I was like, I don't know why they think I'm not worried. Maybe. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, the reason that public speaking doesn't really scare me is, one, I know that I'm basically just telling them my story. It's a story I've told many, many times in different formats. But the other thing is that I'm a real in the moment kind of person. So when I do an interview, I have to turn off all my technology because I just can't have those distractions. I have to focus on the person I'm talking to. And when I go up there to the microphone and give a speech, I'm thinking about, okay, I do not want to trip on the carpet on my own shoes. Okay, I do not want to fall off a stage. So I'm focused in on the person that's leading me, or on my cane taps to make sure I get to where I'm supposed to be standing safely. That's my first thing. And then after that, I'm thinking about, okay, what is my first point? And I hardly ever even think about, the audience. Are they paying attention? Are they liking me? Usually I'm already on to my next topic before I even notice if they've laughed at my last joke. Because I really, it's not exaggeration. I really have to be mindful. I have to be in the moment in order to to stand there and give a talk, because there is, and I'm impressed by people who can give a talk off of a teleprompter or off of a prepared speech. I honestly don't know how you do it, how you're reading one thing and talking to people and gauging their response, and just all of those different things at one time. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's all I can do to just stand here and think about what I'm going to say next. And as long as I do that, it doesn't seem to get scared or nervous from the audience. I mean, and I hope that doesn't make people mad at me. So, but it is all about being in the moment, treating everything as it's an experience. And I've been very fortunate that way. I recently had a friend tell me, he said, Max, most people I know, when they get scared of stuff, they run away from it. When you get scared of stuff, you run towards it. And I told him, I said, I kind of like that. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by it, because I don't see myself as a daredevil or especially brave or courageous. But I have people who are always telling me that I am, especially when they hear that I've traveled places by myself and plan to do that more.
Yeah, and you're not letting those fears stop you from moving forwards, and that's a really big key point, is that you don't let those things become stumbling blocks or hurdles to keep you from achieving what you want to. And speaking of hurdles,
it seems like more often than not,
So speaking of hurdles, what kind of hurdles when you were starting your particular business, like the blogging and being an author, what kind of hurdles did you have to overcome in order to get that going?
Right. Well, with the writing, I had written a book in response to a challenge to be part of an online summit. They wanted me to have a book to either give away or offer at a discount as part of being in the summit. And so I started writing it. And the writing went really easy. The problem was when it came time to edit it, and then when it came time to publish it. Because while I am I'm not generally scared of many things, I don't like roller coasters or high places, but I did go through that conversation that a lot of authors have with themselves, like, okay, are they going to like it? Are they going to read it? Are they going to think, why should we listen to him? Are they going to buy it? Is anybody going to be helped by this book? Is it going to embarrass me? Are people going to laugh at me because of, you have to have that conversation. And eventually, I had been showing the manuscript to a few people, and one of them finally said, Max, in this blog post, you mentioned that you work with an editor named Lorraine Reguly from Wording Well, who I think you've had on your show. So Max, if you don't send this book off and get it edited and published, I'm going to send it for you. And so that was the end of the internal discussion, and I sent the book off and got it published. And I think it's helped a lot of people by writing it and getting it out there. But the thing I would tell any author is that I personally don't think it ever gets any easier. I think every time you send a manuscript off to edit it and then later to have it actually published to Amazon or CreateSpace, or for those who have traditional publishers, I think you're always going to have that fear. You're always going to have that conversation. And I think that a lot of people would do better if they didn't have this expectation that the fear goes away, because it really doesn't. You get better at dealing with it, but those gremlins, they don't go away. They may hide for a while. They may hang out in the cave, but when it comes to that moment of pressing send or publish on your latest book, they'll be back.
Yep.
And then on the blogging, originally I had a little trouble with the WordPress platform and using the screen reader, but somebody suggested I use a program called Mars Edit, which is a third-party app for people using a screen reader. It's only available for Mac. It's not available for Windows. But it allows you to basically write your blog posts as if they are just ordinary text documents. And then you click a few buttons and you can add your headings and your links and stuff. and you upload it, and it takes care of all the stuff about getting the post from your computer to the WordPress dashboard and having it show up like it's supposed to. And so that really helped me out a lot, because for a while I was a short blog post would take me an hour or more, and a long blog post might take me most of the day, just to try to get it where I felt like it was a pretty good post that I'd feel proud of people seeing. So, it's one of those things that now that once you find the proper tools, then you get practice. You do it enough times, then you get to where it's pretty easy. So those would be blogging and the publishing of the books.
So what is maybe a particular profession that's out there that you've perhaps entertained over the years that you might have thought, someday I'd like to do that? Is there something that you've sort of had in the back of your mind that if you weren't doing what you're doing, that you'd want to try that?
I'm lucky in that if I want to try something I haven't been doing before, there's nothing that stops me from doing it. I have had many, quote, coaches tell me, Mr. Ivey, you need to focus in on one or two things and just get rid of all this other foolishness, and you'll be much more successful, and you'll make a lot more money, and you'll be a lot happier. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm having fun doing it the way I'm doing it, where, sometimes I record videos of me singing. I've toyed with the idea of doing a presentation called Music and Motivation, where I would sing some songs and tell some stories and share some life lessons. And I've posted a couple of sample videos, and people seem to like the sample videos. Whether or not they would like a whole hour of it in person, I don't know. But, I have some friends in the UK who have invited me to come over there and visit and travel and spend some time sharing my message with people in the UK and Europe. So, I'd like to travel more. And sometimes things that come along that, well, that would be cool to do, they weren't necessarily my idea. They might be a suggestion from a friend, or maybe even a good old-fashioned double dog dare from a friend. It just and sometimes you do it and you're like, well, that was fun, let's do that again. Or this, I wouldn't do that again unless I host a podcast called What's Your Excuse, where I interview people about how they become the person they end up being. And hopefully someday we'll get you on the show. But when I first did it, I would only do it if I had somebody as a co-host with me to manage the technical side of things, so I could just have a conversation. But eventually now I can do the thing all by myself and enjoy doing it by myself, because I've found Zoom, and I've found some tools that allow me to have a conversation without the technology and that sort of stuff intruding. So
sure.
That's one of those things I was like, yeah, I would do this, but only if. That's sometimes. So I would say the one thing I try to remember when it comes to these new ideas and these new challenges is that I try not to put limits on God, because a lot of times I've found that once I stop saying, okay, this is who I am, these are the things I do or that I'm going to do, once I stop saying that and allow other things to come in, then some amazing, crazy things happen, like becoming the blind blogger, like winning the Amtrak Writer in Residence and going off to New York, or who knows what the next thing is going to be. I never know. I'm waiting to find out what my next adventure is going to be.
That's well said. Well said. So, what would you say, Max, is your greatest strength as far as character traits? What's your greatest strength there?
I'm shameless. I have no filter. I have no barriers when it comes to asking people either for help or for opportunities. And I think this is one of those areas where I'm really helped out by the fact that I am blind. I have a disease where we knew at an early age I would eventually lose my vision. So all my life, people were telling me one of two things: Max, either look at the person you're talking to, or never be afraid to ask for help, because somebody will always want to help you, and you you'll create more trouble for yourself by not asking. So
Sure.
That plus the fact that I was a carny for, most of my life, I have had to ask people to come play games on the Midway. I've had to call people and cold call people for event bookings. So I'm really good at asking for stuff, and I'm doing my best to teach others how to ask, because, there is a lot of stigma among people, especially business people, about asking for help. It's like, if I have to ask other people, I'm not professional, I'm uneducated, ignorant, stupid. There's so many negative adjectives that come along with asking somebody else for help, even online, which is better nowadays than it was before so many people were working and doing business online. But even now, there's still a hang-up when people have that. So I've come up with this expression, which I think has helped a lot of people, and I hope if your listeners pay attention to nothing else I've said today, this is one thing I want them to remember. When you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have gotten from helping you.
That's true.
And there are so many people out there who have talent, skills, education. They've spent years, if not decades, becoming the person they are now. And they would just love it if somebody come along and go, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. I would really appreciate your help. Would you help me? And there are just so many people out there who have what you need. You just have to decide that there's nothing negative or embarrassing about asking. And I find that once people start to think about it from the other person's point of view, as opposed to thinking about it from their ego point of view, that it becomes something they get better at.
Yeah, and the important point that you just mentioned there, the ego, otherwise known as our pride.
Yes.
If we let our pride get in the way, then we're going to shortchange ourselves from lots of opportunities. And I do like the saying that you mentioned, because what everyone should be doing, I feel, in business is we should all be servants. We're all put here on this earth to affect change in the world and those around us. Our job is to take the gifts and talents that we're given by our Creator and bless other people with those gifts and talents. And if we're not able to ask for help from other people, we're depriving them, as you say, from the ability to use those gifts and talents. So, you're doing a disservice for not only yourself, but the other person.
Yeah. How many times have you seen somebody just get a big smile because they did something, even something minor, for another person who, as I like to say, can do nothing but say thank you?
Yeah, and it's like the saying goes, it's not the things that you do when everybody's watching that gives you character or gives you the biggest reward. It's the things that you do when nobody's watching. And I just really enjoy, even those opportunities where you see somebody doing something, they don't think that you see it, but they're still doing it.
Yeah.
That's the ones I love seeing, is when they're doing it and they don't think they have an audience.
Yeah, that is cool.
So what would you say is your greatest weakness, though, Max?
I'm very disorganized. I'm very unscheduled. I have difficulty staying on tasks. While I don't think of myself as having the shiny object syndrome, because I associate that with people who spend lots of money on the next shiny object, I sometimes do have the shiny object syndrome when it comes to opportunities. So I could be much more predictable, regimented, scheduled, and I do my best. But I think the important thing is, at this point in my life, I know who I am, and in a lot of cases, I just have to decide, okay, what is really important to me, and how can I make sure that I get that done? One of the things I recently did, as an example, is I used to record my podcast in video and audio, and I would post the video to YouTube, and then I would post the audio to a podcasting platform. And it got to the point where no matter which podcasting platform I used, it was like pulling teeth to do it with a screen reader. And I decided, Max, this is making you to the point where you don't want to record episodes or post them. So I said, just because everybody else is on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play, it says you have to be. So I stopped posting the audio, and now I just post the video. I feel much more joy about the whole process, which means I record more often, I post more often, and I share more often.
Yeah. Yep. So, kind of an interesting question here. Each of us have our place that we go to for our creative ideas. It's sometimes, people go out to nature and spend some time outdoors to get their ideas, their creative juices flowing, or maybe a special place in their house or what have you. Is there a special place that you go to get all of your ideas?
I don't really have a special place. I have gotten good ideas while riding my bike that doesn't go anywhere. I've gotten good ideas in my shower, getting a good steam. I've before we lost my buddy Penny, I used to get good ideas by petting that stupid crazy dog for hours on end. It seemed like a lot of times I get good ideas by just deciding not to try to have an idea. Sometimes the best ideas come when you go, okay, I know it's 3:00 in the afternoon, but I'm going to queue up a book, or I'm going to watch a TV episode, or I'm going to watch a sporting event. I'm just not going to think about this particular problem for the next hour and see what my mind comes up with. And sometimes, just letting it, you can't do it all day naturally, but sometimes just letting it roam free and not trying to pressure your brain to come up with that next brilliant idea is a good way to find those ideas.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, because when you're so stressed about trying to come up with a solution, sometimes it's better just to turn it off and let those answers come in their own time.
Yeah, and one thing I will tell people about your reading material or the media that you take in, I know that a lot of people feel like when they're trying to solve a problem or when they're trying to improve their lives, that they should be reading self-help books, or they should be reading biographies or history or something that will educate them in some way. Well, I've come to the conclusion that there are times when, just like your body would rather have a Snickers than something that's good for you, sometimes your mind just needs a good Tom Clancy or John Grisham or Robert B. Parker, if you can find one you haven't read yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for our last question here, it's what I find is sometimes one of my favorite questions, and for my guests, they find sometimes it's not their favorite one. It's kind of a trivia question. Kind of a trivia question here. What's something about you, Max, that nobody really knows? Kind of that trivia thing there.
Well, I would say one thing that most people don't realize, but they should know because it's in my bio, is that I'm one of the few totally blind Eagle Scouts, which is a difficult enough thing to accomplish with complete sight, but to do it with less than legally blind level of vision is an impressive accomplishment that I'm proud of. So that's one thing, but it's in my bio. So hey, that kind of makes this question a little more difficult for me, because there's so little that isn't online or that I haven't mentioned in a previous interview. I mean, I'm serious. Most people, I'm sure, have at least one secret they haven't told anybody yet, but I'm not sure if I do.
Yeah, that's why I love asking it, because most people do have that one, I don't want to say skeleton in the closet, but that one thing that they don't tell people about, which I try to milk out of them.
Yeah. Here's what I will say. I love to sing more than I will usually admit to. And at some point in the future, I would love to be able to sing on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry or in front of one of the major landmarks in New York City, like the 9/11 Memorial or something. Those are, a couple of things that I will admit to here that I have never admitted to before, because they just sound too much like ego to me. But I do love to sing, and I do hope someday that would happen. I mean, heck, if that 10-year-old boy who started singing in the Walmart gets an invitation, it's possible for anybody,
That's right. That's right. And there's no reason to limit, the possibilities that are out there. So, we'll keep our ears out and, hope to see you, standing, standing in the Grand Ole Opry there,
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And the dangerous thing about saying stuff like this is that when you say them, they become real. Everybody's
I
talking
know.
about. When you think something, it becomes something that you focus on. It's more likely to happen. But when you say something out loud and you say it in a format where you know it's being recorded, it becomes real. It has life attached to it. And you never know where those things will come back and either surprise you or bite you in the butt. One of the other things that I often mention when people ask me this particular, say, genre of question is that I am single and I'm open to finding that crazy woman who's willing to put up with me pretty much anywhere in the world. So, that's one of those other things. If you put voice to it, sooner or later, things will happen, which is why I have a really good friend. Her name is Adriana Galvazoni. She's an author from Brazil. We've been friends for 2 years now. And she's an author, an attorney, but we don't hold her being a lawyer against her. She keeps saying, Max, your future is red carpets, red carpets, red carpets. And, of course, she's thinking book launches, speaking gigs, and someday them making a movie out of my life story, or maybe more than one movie out of my story. And so she keeps saying, Max, red carpets, red carpets, red carpets. So I have kind of made that I've made that kind of like my mantra that, whenever I have a day where something isn't going exactly the way I want it to, then I find somewhere and I just write it out or say it online somewhere. Red carpet, y'all.
Yep. Well, Max, it's been a pleasure having you on the program today. And, for those listeners out there, ladies, if you want to go to the Grand Ole Opry and be a guest Max when he's doing his debut.
Yeah. Well, y'all can start by saying hello and getting to know me through my website, theblindblogger.net, theblindblogger.net. And I love meeting new people, making new friends. So don't hesitate to just click the button and send me an email.
Sure. Well, you heard it here, folks. And as I always say, had a great day, have a great week, great weekend, and see you around the bend.